All right, everybody. Good morning. I think we're ready to get started here. It's very nice to see all of you. My name is Brian. I'm going to be one of your Mod 2 instructors. Jameson, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jameson. I'll be your other Mod 2 instructor.
I just realized now my headphones aren't connected.
Can y'all still hear me?
Yes.
Did the sound get any better? My sound got better. That's what's important. All right. So we are going to definitely do a longer intro on day one of the mod, where we want to hear a little bit more about you all and give you a little bit more context on what our backgrounds are. But we will save that for day one of the week of day one of week one. So for today, we're going to go over the intermission work and what you all should be doing over the next week. So yeah, let's get into that. So most things on our in Mod 2 are going to be on our Mod 2 homepage. So I'll just start from the beginning and click on Mod 2. So we're at backend.turing.io/module2. And there is a link here for intermission work. So that's where you can find all of these materials. So high-level overview of what we want you to learn in the intermission work. We want you to understand the basics of HTML elements and their attributes, as well as the basics of CSS styling. And we want you to use those two to create a static web page using both of those. So I would say these first three here are a learning goal, and they all kind of go together with this idea of styling and visualizing web pages. So HTML and CSS, I'm sure at least some of you are familiar with this. This is a very common, this is probably the most common tool used on the web. Just to give you like a kind of sneak peek of what you might be doing, if I double click on this page in my browser and I click inspect, I can actually view all of the HTML that results in this visual over here. So if I like highlight this LI element right here, on the right, I can see on the left how it is visually displayed on this web page. So the HTML and CSS is really the visuals of web applications. Yeah, so that's first like big category of learning. The second is SQL. So SQL and databases. So we want to understand what a database is, first of all, a relational database specifically, and we're going to interact with it by writing some SQL. So databases, another key topic in Mod 2 and just building web applications in general. And then the third bucket here is explore the basics of web development. So this is where we're going to start learning the conventions of a Rails app. So if HTML and CSS are like the visual component, the database is the data component, the web framework, which is Rails, kind of like ties everything together to make a fully functioning application. So we're going to start learning the conventions of a Rails app. We're going to understand what we mean when we say CRUD and what the MVC design pattern is. As I go through this intermission work, I'll try and like pause at some points to take questions. But if you have anything, feel free to use the raise hand reaction, and I'll see your hand and I'll get to your question. All right, so let's talk about what you're actually going to be doing. So your deliverable is going to be a gist on GitHub. You all should be familiar with gist through maybe some Mod 0 work, some of the PD work. I believe you keep track in gist format. So this shouldn't be anything too new. So if I click on this link here, this will just take me to create a new gist on GitHub. And then the second link is copy and paste the markdown from this template into your gist. So if I click on this, this is all of the questions that you are going to be answering through your intermission work. So your job through this intermission work is to complete this, all of these questions. So it says copy and paste. I would not recommend that you just like take it like this and copy and paste, because then you lose formatting. It's just pasting the raw text here. So if you click on this and you click on raw, this will give you the actual markdown formatting. So this is what it'll look like. I'll just like do a Command A, copy all of this, put it in here, and then I would have a new gist. And then if you change the file extension, so maybe this is like intermission work. If you make the file extension .md, that's how you can make this be markdown, and now it's all formatted and nice and pretty here. So that's what that should look like for starting this this deliverable here. So this link to this gist is what we need from you at the end of the intermission work. I also made this secret. Make sure that you also turn this into a public gist. So I can click make public up here, just so we have access to it. Quick note, I'm also recording this. So if anything, if you need to go back, you'll be able to go back and watch this. So that's the deliverable. Yeah, so each assignment is going to have checks for understanding, which is the questions that we saw in this gist. So the way that I would recommend you work through this is don't leave these questions for the end. Work through these questions as you're exploring. So you're working through the HTML section, keep these questions up in front of you so you can kind of like keep an eye on what you should be looking for to answer as you're working through those tutorials. This intermission work is going to be due at 5 the Saturday before the mod begins, so a week from this Saturday. And we really do want to make sure that this is finished. Typically what we see is that if students don't do well on the intermission work, they are starting the mod behind, and so then it is very difficult to catch up. Now, with that said, we understand that you might have plans over intermission week. You might have certain circumstances come up, certain life circumstances. I think we're all familiar at this point that life can throw some curveballs at us, and so we need to be flexible. And so really this kind of applies to us in general, but communication is key. If you communicate with us and you just mention like, hey, this is my circumstance, we're more than willing to work with you. Just please reach out to us. So that is kind of like the overview of what you're going to be doing in the intermission work. We are going to get into more specific what these assignments are. Does anybody have any questions so far? Dougie?
So just to be clear, we're turning in the gist, not each of these individual assignments down here.
That's right.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, so these assignments are going to, so if I like click on one of them, like these two are just set up, but if I click on like the HTML one, it had these checks for understandings are the same as what's in this gist right here. So essentially it's like, hey, remember, this is what you're supposed to be doing while you work through this. But yeah, you don't need to turn in like anything else. And you know, now that I say that, I don't think that's entirely true, because I thought that this just had a link. Yeah, so I think there is one more thing actually. There is a repo that we want you to submit. Yeah, and it's going to be the static challenge repo. So we'll talk more about that. I thought that it asked for that in the gist, but now that I say that, it doesn't. Yeah, also keep note, like if you finish this intermission work in the next 30 minutes and you want to submit, this submission form isn't updated. It's still the 2011 submission. So y'all should say 2102 here. So if y'all are real go-getters, just hold off on submitting, but we should have this updated by the end of the day. I think I saw one other hand up. Was that a duplicate question? And sorry, I kind of brushed over that. So in order to submit this, there is a form at the very bottom here. So I'll just update this link to a 2102 submission form. But yeah, this is what you should be filling out by that 5 p.m. deadline on Saturday. All right, let's get into the specific assignments. So the first one is setting up your Ruby and Rails versions. I think most of you all should be on Ruby 2.5.3 anyway, but if you're not, you should be. You should at least have RBEM installed, and it should be pretty easy to switch over to Ruby 2.5.3. So that's the first thing. And then in order to install Rails, we do require that you're on Rails version 5.2.4.3. I will say that maybe that's not entirely true. We are requiring that you're on Rails 5.2, which is the major version of Rails. The 4.3 is not as important. You might see as we work through some things on Mod 2, some things might be on 5.2.4.5, some things might be on 5.2.4.4. So this isn't as important, but as long you need to be on some flavor of 5.2 for Rails. So if you do Rails-V from the command line, you'll be able to see what version of Rails you're on. The latest version of Rails is Rails 6. And so if you just do a gem install Rails, you're going to get some version of Rails 6, and it's going to be a little, you will have to uninstall that. So when you do gem install Rails, if maybe, you know, I think it's perfectly reasonable that you were maybe curious, you heard that in Mod 2, we're going to be using Rails. So you did a gem install Rails just to check it out. You probably have a version of 6. So if at any point you get a version other than this one that we're looking at, there are instructions down here for uninstalling those versions. So it'll look like running a couple of gem uninstall commands. Andrew?
Does like I want to be clear with Ruby as well. We don't want to have 3.0, so I'm going to have to change that, or are later versions of Ruby okay?
No, you do want to be on an earlier version like 2.5.3. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and just a quick note on this. Dependency management, so like having different versions of different tools, dependency management is a very difficult thing in computer science. So you all have been working in Ruby for the past 6 weeks, but now we're adding on Rails, and Rails adds on all these other libraries, like it has Active Record and Active Support and Active Job, and it brings in Nokogiri and all these other things. So now that you're moving into Mod 2, managing your environment on your computer is going to be more of a challenge than it has. How often did you gem install something in Mod 1? Andrew, can you give me a quick estimate?
I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times at most.
Yeah, exactly. When you all can't see this, can you? Okay, yeah, you can't see that. But essentially what happens is when we use this tool called Bundler, Bundler installs a lot of gems all at once. It installs, I don't know the exact estimate, but dozens of gems at once. So in Mod 1, where you've maybe installed a couple gems here and there, now we're going to be installing lots of gems. So it is important that we kind of manage these versions and make sure that we're all on the same version. And we're going to do our best with that, but I'll just say this right off the bat. Dependency issues and environment issues are going to happen, and they can be very frustrating. And I think the most important thing is to exercise some patience and try to use it as a learning opportunity. A lot of times these environment issues feel like, oh, this is preventing me from doing real work. And I think just reframing that as getting used to your environment and learning about your environment is a learning goal, is something we want you to learn. All right, so that's install Ruby and Rails. Next thing here are a couple other tools. So number 2 is get module 2 tools. The first thing here is the Postgres app. This is pretty straightforward. I haven't seen any install issues. There are 2 separate links for the instructions here. So this is essentially your database on your computer. And then there is another database tool called Postico that we're going to use, which is going to help us visualize that database. So we don't really need to go over these. These instructions, I think, are pretty good. Install Chrome. So Chrome is the web browser that we want you all to use. You might have a preference for another browser, but we really do want you to install Google Chrome. The main reason is, as I just showed you, Chrome has these really nice developer tools for looking at HTML and developing HTML and CSS. So we do want you to install Chrome and have that as your default browser so that you have easy access to these developer tools. All right, so that's all the setup stuff. The next section here is our styling section. So we are going to do an intro to HTML. And these are the checks for understanding you should be answering as you go through this. And so we're going to be working through the W3 Schools HTML tutorial, not the entire thing, but just these key parts here. Yeah. So I'll click on maybe a later one to kind of show you how this will work. So we're learning about paragraphs, for instance. We'll click on this. And these tutorials are nice and short, and they're also very interactive. So it'll tell you what the thing is. A paragraph always starts in a new line, and it is usually a block of text. It tells us how to define it with a p tag, and a paragraph always starts a new line. Browsers automatically add some white space before and after a paragraph. And then the thing that's really nice about these tutorials, and that I highly recommend that you do, is click on these try it yourself buttons here, and it lets you play around with the HTML. So I'm learning about paragraph tags, and let's see what happens if I change this to, this is Brian's. Okay, I can't spell Brian's paragraph. And then I can click run up here and see how that changes my visual output on the right here. So really make sure that you're not just reading through these, but you're also playing around with it and kind of understanding how you can use these. Yeah. And then usually at the bottom of these tutorials, they'll have some exercises, which are also really handy. You don't necessarily need to go through all of these references here. Yeah. So that's what the W3 Schools HTML tutorial looks like. Does anyone have any questions on that so far? The next section here is going to be Intro to CSS. And this is going to be very similar. We're working through another W3 Schools tutorial here. And it says complete, rather than listing off each section, it just says complete everything from introduction to fonts. So if I look over here on the left, that would be introduction, all the way down here to fonts. So there's maybe like a dozen in here, maybe 15, something like that. And very similar, this is going to give you access to some of these. It's going to walk you through what these properties are doing, and then it's going to give you a chance to try it yourself. So then I could come in here and say, this background color is light blue. Can I just say blue in here? Like, oh, look, I changed it to blue. So again, highly recommend that you're playing around with these as you go. And then the final thing we're going to do here is the static challenge. So learn about HTML is part one, learn about CSS is part two. Static challenge is really where you get to have some fun and put your newfound skills to the test. So a static challenge is practice using pure HTML, CSS. Essentially what you're doing is you're taking a image of a web page and trying to recreate it using HTML and CSS. For how much time should I spend doing the static challenge? We do recommend that you spend no more than 2 hours doing this. I think this 2 hour time limit is really assuming that you have intentionally worked through the tutorials and like understand the HTML. If you are someone who really just wants to like get your hands dirty and try something, you might want to like start with the static challenge and see how much you can do without doing any of the tutorials, and then use the tutorials to learn as you go. A lot of times I'll use that strategy to just see how far can I get without looking up anything. and then I'll hit a point, oh, okay, now I need to go study and learn some stuff. So I think that that's a reasonable strategy if you want to do that, but it would probably take you a little bit longer than 2 hours if you're doing that. So again, this is 2 hours, assuming that you're feeling pretty comfortable with everything that you learned in the tutorial. So the note here is that styling can always be better. So it's good to like kind of set a time limit and know when to walk away. So our goal as backend developers is really better spent elsewhere. I don't want to send the message that as backend developers, you don't need to worry about HTML or CSS or any styling. It's just that it's not maybe the highest priority for us. Okay, so let's click on this repository and kind of show you what this should look like. I think I need to restart my share here to do my desktop. And what should I do? I'm going to make a 2102 directory. A little bigger. Okay, so what this should look like, and again, like that, I am recording this. I would not be surprised if you have to go back and watch the recording, or if you would like to go back and watch the recording to get some more help with this. But this is what it should look like. So I'll clone down this repository, and it's going to take a little longer than some other repos because it does have images in it, which are bigger files. So let's go into that repository. We'll open it up with Atom. We'll open it up with Atom. Atom, you're really messing me up over here. There we go. Okay, so we'll open it up with Atom. We've got a couple of files in here. So this index.html, this is the main file where you're going to be writing your HTML. So the way the HTML works is we have a head section, which is kind of like just data about this HTML document. And then the visual elements we put go inside this body. They're kind of like nested underneath this body. So what I can do here is I can use a command from the command line to open this static challenge. So if I say open from the command line and I open that file index.html, it will automatically open it up in a web browser. So the open command, if you haven't used it in your terminal, picks the best application to open up whatever your file you're trying to open. So if I'm opening an HTML file, it knows to open that up in Chrome. So this is why I say set your default browser to Chrome, because then it will automatically open these types of files in your Chrome browser. And so then I could use inspect here, and I could see the HTML that I've written. So this is a very handy tool. I would highly recommend that you get started using this inspect tool on the static challenge. So use this to see both the HTML that's being rendered, being written, and being rendered on the left. So render is the visual output of your HTML. So for example, right now I've got just like a blank white page. If I go over here and I make one of those paragraph tags, whoops. Do you wish to see all? That's not fine. If I try to make one of these paragraph tags, I could say, this is Brian's paragraph, something like that. And I can come over here, and you can even see in the file, in the URL bar up here, it says file. So it knows that we're looking at a file on our computer. And so I can hit refresh. It should reload that file, and boom, there's my new paragraph tag in there. So it says, this is Brian's paragraph, and now I can see that. And one other thing that you can do, if I think the most important thing is just using this as a visual tool to see your HTML, but we can also come in here and edit the HTML directly in the browser. So I could say, this is Jameson's paragraph. And we can see it change over here as well. So that's another cool thing that you could do. So that is what the process for developing your web page should look like. Let's talk about the actual task here. So underneath images, or sorry, underneath completed, this is your actual challenge. So your challenge is to take one of these images and recreate it. So for instance, I'm looking at this image and I see, I could even open this with my open command. So I could open, it's under the completed folder, challenge1.png. Oops. Challenge1.png. And that's going to open it with a different program because this is not a HTML file. So I can look at this and say, okay, this is what I'm trying to recreate. So maybe I'll start with this 5280 landmarks header up here. So then maybe I'll come over here to my index, and inside my body tag, I'll make like, I'll make that 5280 landmarks. And so now maybe if I put this on the right, I can compare that with my, where did it go? So I could like split my screen like this, and I could compare what I'm doing to this actual image. So if I refresh, now I see I have that header here, but it's not looking quite right. So I would want to add some CSS to maybe make it white and give it this background of red, et cetera, et cetera. What else do you need to know? This style sheets right here is the other file that you will need. So this style sheet main.css, if I split the screen between these two, we can see that in this head tag, we have a link to main.css. So what that means is that this CSS file is already hooked into this HTML file. So if I wanted to add a style to my background here, so maybe I'll say for H1s, let's set background color to red, maybe. I think that should work. Come over here, refresh, and now I'm closer to styling this page. I've now got this red background here, and now I'd maybe want to make it bigger, change the color text. So maybe I come in here and say like, the color of this header is white. And now that changes my color. So those are the two files that you're going to need to work in. You're going to need to work in this index.html and main.css. Reset.css, you don't need to worry about this file. This is essentially just like giving you a blank slate of CSS to work with. Browsers often add in a lot of default styles. So this is just overriding a lot of those default. You don't really need to worry about that reset file. If you need any images, so like this image of the Denver Art Museum, that is inside these this images folder here. So you don't need to like search the web for that exact image. I believe it's one of these one. Yeah, it's one.jpg in here. And I think that's about it. Oh, site copy is another, this is a pretty simple one, but this will have all the text that you need. So if I open this up, this is the text for like Denver Art Museum. And then it has this paragraph of Latin here, the lorem ipsum paragraph. And so that's what we can see down here in the actual challenge that I'm trying to copy. And at the end of doing all this, just like normal Git, you would add the files that you've changed, commit them, push them up to your repo, and then you can submit them. That we will ask for that link in that submission form. All right, any questions? That is all on the like HTML section. Jennifer.
So just to summarize so that I get a general understanding, the HTML is responsible for holding like the actual text that you're going to have on the page, and then CSS is responsible for like the font, the size, the color, and design and everything.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So if I'm trying to put like this paragraph inside of my, if I'm trying to get this into my view, this text should be inside of my HTML. So like I'll put this in here, and then yeah, the actual text goes in the document.
So that, can you go back real quick to Adam where you're, so like lines 13, 14, 15, would you, like when you referred to that, to what, how would you refer to that? Because it doesn't, I see it's under header 1, like H1, but it doesn't have like a paragraph number. So if you're specifying the font on that paragraph in CSS, is it, am I asking even a question that makes
Sorry, I don't know why I was not able to like scroll on that file.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was a little distracted. Can you ask your question
That's
one more time?
My mouse was like going diagonal yesterday on its own, so I understand. So like here on line 11, it says H1, which I'm assuming is like header 1.
hmm
If I wanted to change the font on that, I know I could refer in CSS to H1, but if I were wanting to change the paragraph font only, what would you do, like H1 paragraph 1?
Not
Probably
quite.
getting
And
like a little too far ahead. I just wanted to get like a good grasp.
yeah, I think that you already have a good grasp of understanding that this is a header tag. Like really, if you get that coming out of this, that's good. The CSS tutorial will definitely walk you through how to like kind of connect the two easier. But just as a preview, what I could do is I could do something like I could give my p tag an ID to say like this is like the main paragraph or something like this. And that allows me to target that specific element with my CSS. So over here, I could say the syntax is a # to say I'm looking for an ID. And then I say that ID of main paragraph, and I could change just that one paragraph. So maybe I'll make this a pink paragraph. And so then if I come over here and refresh, now the text is pink.
Thank you. I'm just trying to like prolong my mental breakdown as long as possible coming into mod 2. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to address the mental breakdown part of it a little bit, the key things that you need to have coming away from the static challenge is really what's in the checks for understanding. So if I go back here to, actually, let's just go to the main gist. We're really just interested in like, this is a couple of like, how does HTML work? But then these are the tags that we should have. So really it's your headers, paragraph. So we've already been over 2 of them, but actually we've been over the body already. And then image is how you're gonna get an image in there. A tag is how you're gonna make a link. And then there's these others, which you might not use on the static challenge, but we at least want you to explore them. So there are like, I think it said it in the instructions for the static challenge, styling can always be better. And I just want to encourage you, don't fall into that trap of like feeling you have to learn everything about HTML and CSS. It's really this idea of these key tags targeting elements with IDs and classes and by their element type right here. Let's go ahead and take a palm here. We've been going for a little while. Yeah, let's take a palm and come back at 9:39. Come back at 9:39. All right, so I'm about ready to get started again. One thing that I would like to ask you all, and this is something that we'll do, I don't know if you all did much in Mod 1, but I would ask you all to please turn your videos on if you are able. I understand some people have circumstances that don't allow them to turn their videos on, but if you can, we'd really appreciate it. It does help us a lot in terms of just like tracking engagement as best as we can. And really, like we want to see y'all's faces. We don't want to look at black squares. We don't get to be in person as much, so it's nice to get that face-to-face interaction as much as we can in the Zoom world. So thank you all very much. I'm going to keep going unless anybody, well, let me stop here. Does anybody have any questions about anything so far? Alrighty then. So that kind of covers the styling portion of this this intermission work. Let's get into the database portion. So the next thing here is Intro to SQL. By the way, I think it might even say in one of these tutorials, like it's pronounced SQL, not, or it's pronounced SQL, not SQL. Jameson, do you have an opinion on that? Have you heard anyone?
Sorry, can you repeat that? The pronunciation?
Do people say SQL? Yeah. Do people say SQL or SQL?
I honestly hear both.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's not worth it to argue about it. Anyway, so SQL is what we're going to use to interact with a database. So database, very, very key part of our web applications. We're going to spend a lot of time on the first full day of classes. So the first Tuesday, we're going to spend a lot of time just exploring databases and talking more about databases. So this is a pretty important part. Again, the checks for understanding are listed before you start any of these. There are two sections to the SQL intermission work. So the first part is this Jumpstart Lab tutorial. This one is definitely more just like kind of follow along, not as much for you to do here. It does give you some hands-on experiments, and it does get into SQLite. So one thing that you can kind of challenge yourself on early on is that you're going to be working with SQLite in this tutorial. And then in the next section, you're going to be working with PostgreSQL. So there's going to be two different types of databases that you're interacting with. And I think that's just something for you to think about. What does it mean to have two different types of databases or two different databases? Yeah, so this will kind of walk you through the fundamentals of what you need to know about SQL and interacting with a database. And yeah, a lot of this is hands-on. It's going to show you how to write the actual SQL. We're going to get into relationships, and we're going to get into a three-way relationship, which is this a many-to-many? Doesn't matter. And then it's going to get into this section here. So this is kind of where we want you to start. It says in the instructions, do not do the SQL SEQUEL tutorial. So you are going to stop right here and not click on this and not go any further. So do make sure you're reading on ORMs and Active Record. We are going to use Active Record extensively in Mod 2. So it's good for you to at least like start reading a little bit about it. And I think that this last sentence is very important. Knowing what's happening at the SQL level can be important for security, performance, and data integrity. So while we are going to be working a lot with Active Record, we do want you to have a solid base in SQL. So that's why we're getting started with it in the intermission work. So that's the tutorial here. And then the next part is exercises. So we've got these PG exercises. Let's go ahead and let's go right into one of these. So this is what it's going to look like. It's going to show you a schema reminder here. So the schema is essentially how your data is organized in your database. So we can see here, we've got, this probably doesn't make sense, but I'll just kind of talk through it. We've got three tables. We've got a members table, a bookings table, and a facilities table. And it looks like a bookings table belongs to a facility. The bookings belong to a facility and a member. So then it gives me a question here. How can you produce a list of facilities that charge a fee to members? So what I would do here is I would try to write my SQL under this your answer section. So maybe we'll say like select star from cd.facilities. And then I can click run query and it'll tell me if it's correct or not. So this X means that it's incorrect. And so I can look here and see, and I can match this up with the expected results. So I can see on the left here, we're expecting to see tennis court 1 with a member cost of 5. Okay, I've got that one. And then we've got tennis court 2. Okay, I've got that one. But then I see in my output, I have badminton court, and this one doesn't have badminton court. So I need to figure out how I can kind of filter out that data. As you're working, you can also use these other buttons here, like a help right here will tell you some easy things to do. This is not super helpful. The hint is a little bit more helpful. So if I really don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here, I could say hint, and it'll tell me, hey, maybe the where clause would be a good idea in order to filter out rows. So I could say, okay, yeah, that's maybe a good idea. Let's say where, I don't know, where fee is greater than 0. We're trying to find facilities that charge a fee to members. So let's see about that, and let's run this query. And now I'm going to get an error output. This is a this probably applies to a lot of your learning as a student, but one of the biggest areas of growth that I see for new students is reading errors. So a lot of times when you're working with a new language like SQL, the errors can seem kind of foreign, but I would say really try to like read the errors and understand what they're trying to say. So in this case, it says column fee does not exist. Well, that's because if I look at my table here, I don't have anything called fee, but maybe I can do member cost and run that, and that will give me the right answer here. If I go to another exercise here, like I go to this string search one, if I'm trying to like do something in here and I keep running it and I really can't get it, you can go straight to the answer here. So I'd say give it a good shot. If you can't get it, that's okay. Just make sure that if you're looking at this answer, that you are reading and understanding these explanations. Whoops, not what I wanted. If you do go to the answer, make sure you're reading it and understanding it. And I would say even go so far as to like play around with what it's telling you to do in your output. So these are the exercises that you should be working through. Circling back to these instructions up here. So this mentions how in the first tutorial, you're going to be using SQLite. And in this next tutorial, you're going to be using Postgres. So it links to some documentation. You probably won't need this documentation too much, but it's there if you need it. And so we've got 3 sections of the basics right here. Then we get into joins, and then we get into aggregates down here. And I think this is what I had already said here. Okay, so to reiterate from before, I think this is a previous paragraph. We are not expecting you to be masters of SQL coming out of this. So we do want you to time box these exercises. So in the same way that with HTML and CSS, we don't need you to learn everything about styling web pages. We really just want to get the basics of SQL under our belts before we jump into mod 2. So the recommended time boxing here is 2 hours per section. So that's a total of 6 hours. So that would be 2 hours working through these ones here, 2 hours working through these ones here, and then 2 hours working through these ones here. And then again, just make sure that you're answering the checks for understanding. And I believe that is everything for this SQL Intro to Databases section. What questions do y'all have? Ryan?
Yeah, given we just spent 6 weeks on the Ruby, big picture, how does the end of this 6 weeks are we supposed to be at the same level that we are now with the Ruby basics, or will we be sharpening those skills along the way?
Yeah, you should be sharpening your Ruby skills along the way. We're not going to have a lot of classes that are dealing with just Ruby topics, but we will have some of them. So we are going to have a class methods class. We are going to have, or a class and instance methods class. We're going to have an inheritance class. So some of those topics that you might have started to dig into towards the end of mod 1, we will pick right back up in the beginning of mod 2. So yes, we do want to continue your Ruby education. The next section of the pre-work is the Rails section, and Rails is written in Ruby. So that's where the Ruby comes in. So there is going to be Ruby in this intermission work as well, if that's kind of why you're asking. Before I get into that next Rails section, any other questions coming up? Dougie?
This may be a significant jump ahead, but what does the, I guess, what is my question is, what's the focus of the like the mid mod and the final assessment? Like, what is that going to be? What is that going to look like?
Sure. So this, actually, let's go to, just so you can kind of connect it to what you're going to be doing in the intermission work. Really, a lot of the basic or the introductory SQL content, but I would say we have a heavy emphasis on relationships, if I can find that. Yeah. So this relationships section, and where it talks about joining tables. Does it use foreign key in here? Let me do a quick search. There it is. Yeah, it is right here. So relationships, foreign keys, and joining tables, that is all going to be like very key to the mid mod. Yeah. And then I would, or the mid mod and the final. And then the, I guess like the real main focus is Rails, which is the next section. So Rails has a lot of like kind of conventions that you need to know. So I would say that's the another key piece. And then the final key piece is testing. So the testing, we are not going to start with that in the intermission work. We're going to add that in towards the end of week 1. And so that's going to be, that's going to kind of round out all of those key pieces. I can show you real quick if you, I think in general, it would be good for you to just kind of take a peruse our mod 2 homepage, but you can go right to this assessment section here. And this has the rubric of what we are expecting on the assessments. So it kind of says it right here, MVC, active record, and TDD, those are going to be the big categories that we're looking for. And completion is kind of the like, can you use Rails to do a task right here? So that's where I would point you to if you really want to dig into what we're expecting. So we're really looking for you to hit a 3, this passing mark, in all 4 of these categories. Let's get into that Rails section. So the last section here is the Rails tutorial. This is kind of like your introduction to Rails. I don't need to go through this too much. This is written by instructors, so it really should be, it's really written for you. So there shouldn't be anything too crazy or too different that you're not used to in here. Yeah, so I don't think I need to go over too much of this. Yeah, I think we're probably good. So Dougie, kind of more to your question, I would say the checks for understanding inside this Rails section are also key concepts. So what CRUD is, what MVC is, getting used to the file, getting used to how the different parts of Rails interact. So it says, what 3 files would you need to do this? So this is kind of like a little bit different from mod 1, where you might only write, you might only touch 1 file if you are, maybe we're making like a dog class. We would only need to touch 1 file. But in Rails, if we're trying to keep track of dogs, we would need to create a model, a view, a controller, a route. There's a lot of moving pieces there. Params is another key piece, and then routing is another key piece down here. So yeah, these checks for understandings are probably another really good indicator of what we want you to know. And I think that is pretty much it for the intermission work. The final thing that I want to say to you all is I would highly recommend that you all work together on this intermission work, or try to at least give each other or give some space to work together. I know some cohorts have done like open Zoom rooms for study halls. This is a little bit more of a problem when we were in person, because students didn't necessarily know how to interact when we weren't in person together. So I don't think that's as much of a problem for you all that you're used to on Zoom. But I would just say, like, I think that it would be really great if you all had some time to like meet together or work with a partner. The other thing that I'll say is that we will be available to answer your questions. We might not be able to get back to you immediately, but if you do have anything, please feel free to tag Jameson and I in the cohort channel. We're both in the code. Jameson, I believe you're in the Code Help channel now. So yeah, you can tag us in the Code Help channel and we will see that. If there's something you believe is just personal to you, like maybe you're getting a setup issue that you're not sure you should be dealing with, you can DM us as well. Just so I'm transparent about my availability, I am planning to be out of town until Thursday afternoon, so Monday to Thursday. But I will still be able to check Slack throughout those days. So I might be a little bit slower those days, but if something does come up, feel free to tag me in something and we'll get to it as soon as I can. All right, y'all. Jameson, anything you would like to add? Any other questions before we wrap up?
I don't have anything to add, just really looking forward to getting to know you all better when we start the next inning.
All right, y'all. I will let you go here. Thank you very, very much for your time. And I will post in the cohort channel the recording for this.